Assalamualaikum, my name is Arfat and welcome to a brand new video. In today's video, I'd like to share with you some of the books that I have in my wall full of books. And so this video was also a request by one of you in a few videos before, and I finally got the time to actually do this. And so what I'm focusing on here is what are the kinds of books in my so-called home library, and why do I purchase these kinds of books as compared to other kinds of books, and what are the important books that I would like to recommend you if you are just starting out into this field of comparative religion. And so before I continue, I would like to apologize if you're hearing the fan noise. That is because it's really warm here in my room at the moment, and I need the fan to be on, so I apologize again. Okay, so basically kind of my home library, so to speak, is not really arranged in a particular order. It used to be, but as I was researching so on and so forth, I don't really bother to put them back where they belong, and so over time it gets messy and messy again. But maybe after a few months, 8 months or so, or once per year, I do try to categorize books together so that at least I know if I need books on textual criticism, I can just look for them and all of them will be there, right? And that is what happened over the years, but every time it becomes messy again. So basically, in no particular order, basically what I have is the front here, I try to put dictionary, concordances, some references. For example, I have the Oxford Companion to the Bible here, and then behind this, it is actually two layers. Behind this, I have more of the really books that I don't really use at the moment because they're not of particular research interest at the moment. But I do get some interest from time to time as I was reading a few of books, and then there's a footnote which references to the books I already have, and so I kind of want to double check or kind of want to reread the portions. And so most of the time I'll have to actually remove a lot of the front books, put them on my printer, and then I have to go and it becomes messy and messy. But the reason why I have a lot of books, the current books that I have at home, is because where I'm from, you can hardly find the sort of literatures that I have behind me, especially the Anchor Bible commentary. I'll just move it closer. You'll not be able to see my full face, but it's okay. So the Anchor Bible commentaries that I have, as well as the Hermeneia commentaries that I have, is very difficult to find them in my local library. I have to go to the National Library, and that's very far away from where I stay. And so my local libraries do not have these kinds of books, and so which is the reason why I have to purchase them so that I have them. And also because I like to write paper. I've written a lot of paper that I've not actually uploaded, and because they're not peer reviewed, and so I'm just trying to be academically genuine, so to speak, and so they've not been peer reviewed, and so I do not upload them. But so I have Hermeneia, I have the Anchor Bible commentaries, and then I have a lot of the like Cambridge History of Christianity, right? And a lot of other books like Theology books and so forth. A lot of my books, out of 100%, I would say about 70% of them are actually published by university presses, about 70% of them. And the conditions for me to buy books is that these books have to be, first and foremost, published by academic presses, by university presses, and they have to be written by scholars, and their works must be peer reviewed, and that the other category, which is slightly loose, right, is that they must be within the scope of the present century. For example, there's the, if you are aware, the Anchor Bible commentaries. There's two commentaries on Mark, and there's two commentaries on Corinthians, right? And so I get the latest one because the Markan commentary, which was published in the in the 20th century, as well as that of the Corinthians, published in 1974, if I'm not mistaken, a lot of these studies have been outdated, and so, which is why the criteria for me to actually purchase books, because these books are very pricey, and so the criteria is that they must be within the scope of the current research. Now there are exceptions. For example, I have the books I have the commentary by Bultmann on John, even though a lot of the commentators nowadays have actually rejected Bultmann's theory that the Gospel of John was heavily influenced by Gnosticism. And so, but the reason why Bultmann is still in my library and why I purchased Bultmann is because it is actually, there's a lot of other useful areas that he researched on, right, which have influenced modern commentators. And so the works are still useful. Another works that I have is by F.C. Bauer regarding Paul. And so again, these are also works that have influenced the Pauline research, and so they are still relevant today. I also have books that are published in the 19th centuries and 18th centuries as well, though very, very little, but they are also important because they show the development of the studies from the Enlightenment period all the way to modern day, which is also important, especially the development of textual criticism and the development of the studies of the gospel. Right? And so especially the source theory, the methods, and so these are all very important works. And so that is the exceptions. But the main rule is that they have to be published by university presses. They have to be published by prominent scholars. Now, this could be scholars that are on the liberal camps and scholars that are devotional, conservative, fundamentalists, right? Right. And so the other areas that I try to balance my home library in a sense whereby you have liberal scholarships and you also have evangelical fundamentalist scholarships in your library, because I feel that if I'm taking the academic route, I have to entertain arguments from both sides, and I can't just be biased and look at arguments that is of convenience to me because of my religious faith, because of my faith. And so I also have to entertain arguments from the people or the camps that I disagree with because of my convictions, right? But I still have to entertain their arguments and see which one actually makes sense or which one is more persuasive, right? And so that, I believe, is the most fair and genuine route to take if your approach is to be academic. So I would say out of 100%, I would say about 65 to 75%, or even more, 75% of my books are actually books about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The other 20 to 25% are books that talks about ancient history, like ancient Egyptian history, the Sumerian history, the Greek history, and the history of the world wars, language books, dictionaries, and so a lot of other areas that I'm interested also. here in this section, here, if you actually have been paying attention, I have here actually the Egyptian hieroglyph, because I studied hieroglyph before, and so this is very difficult, but it is something that I try to memorize, try to remember, because I'm very interested in the pyramid. There's one book which I read by Robert Buffel when this was back in the 2000s, and that is the Orion's, something to do with the alignment of the Orion's belt with the Pyramid of Giza, and so this is something that actually fascinates me, and that book actually influenced me to get deeper into studying ancient history. And so when I got into studying ancient history, the ancients, they're very religious. They are very religious people. They believe in multiple kinds of gods. And then came Judaism, came Christianity, came Islam. And the Quran also mentions about paganism as well. And so it kind of revolves around each other. And so which is why I got interested into exploring deeper into ancient religion, ancient cults. And then eventually I'll explore into the European history. For example, one of the areas that fascinates me the most is the burning of witches in Europe, in Britain, burning of witches. And so from there, everything is interconnected. I learned about the medieval life, the social history of people in Europe during the Middle Ages, so on and so forth. And so that is my background from reading itself, exposing myself to all these kinds of knowledge through reading. And it actually provides me a background context to understanding the religious history or the social history of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all the way from 300 BCE all the way to the present day. But my research at the beginning was very broad. My personal research or personal learning or quest, endeavor, was very broad. And so if I were to read literatures that speaks about ancient Egyptian history from 3,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago all the way to modern history, I will not be able to comprehend the massive amount of knowledge. And so it was advised to me that you should at least have an area of focus. And so my area of focus ever since have been ancient history, all the way up to the advent of Islam in the 7th century. But that doesn't mean that I stopped my research in Christianity and Judaism. I actually further my research on Islamic empires, Islamic dynasties. For example, you have the Mughal dynasty, you have the Ottoman dynasty, you have the Safavid dynasty, and also I researched deep into Ismailism, Shiism, Sufism, and all the different kinds of Sufi tariqas, and so on and so forth. And also now my area of interest is actually in the different denominations of Christianity. Even though the major denominations, we have the Catholics, which made up the majority of the Christians in the world. And then we have the Protestantism, we have the Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox. And so now I'm studying deeper into the different branches as to what is the difference between, for example, Pentecostalism compared to Anabaptists, right? And so these are all areas that are much difficult to comprehend because there's so many different kinds of variants, and some are variants on theology, some are variants on practices, but they all believe in the Trinity. And then I broke away from these camps, from the Reformed Church in the 16th, 17th century. We have the Michael Servetus so-called descendant, which is the Unitarian. And the Unitarians, they don't believe in the Trinity. And we also have the modern Nazarenes, and we also have the cult that follow John the Baptist today. And so all these are different strands of Christianity, which fascinates me as well. And there's one book in particular which I should have found before I make this video, and this was written by McGrath. I forgot the first name of this author, but it is published by Blackwell. So it talks about the different strands of Christianity, and so this is my reference at the moment, even though there are many other books out there. So that is my current area of interest, and the other area of my interest is to research more into the religious relationship, or the relationship between Islam and Christianity. And so there's actually a few books that I would like to recommend on that one. Okay, for example, you have here the book The Imam of the Christians. The Imam of the Christians. Okay, and this is published by Princeton University Press. Right. Imam of the Christians by Philip Wood. And so the subtitle is The World of Dionysius of Tel-Mahre. This is circa 750 to 850. Okay. The other books is Islam and Christianity. The other books is Islam and Christianity, Theological Themes in Comparative Perspective by John Reinhardt. And this is published by University of California Press. Right, so the idea behind, let me just move you back. The idea behind comparative religion, or studying comparative religion, is actually not to debate. I've got into debates, street debates in the past, which is actually why I'm interested to gain more knowledge so that I can beat my opponents. But after that was when I was very young. But now that I have more wisdom, the whole idea is actually not to debate. It is actually to come to common terms, as the Quran actually invites us to do. And so, how can we come to common terms if we don't understand each other's perspective, if we don't understand each other's view? And there are people out there who believes and firmly believes, they are rooted in their beliefs in that, whereby you should just give da'wah in a way whereby call people to Tawheed, which is calling people to the oneness of God, is not the Trinity, calling people to the strict monotheism, and to accept the final messenger, Rasulullah SAW, the Prophet Muhammad, Prophet of Islam. And then if they do not want to accept, then that is their problem. Right? And this is exactly what these people do, and they have evidence from the Quran, right? Because Allah SWT actually mentions to the Prophet ﷺ that his job ﷺ is just to convey the message. His job is not to convert people, because it is Allah Azza wa Jal who actually converts people, who change the hearts of people. Right? And so these people actually have a very strong point. Right? But sometimes it works that way, and sometimes it doesn't work. Right? So those people will say, if it doesn't work, meaning it's not meant to be. Right? But there are people out there who takes a different approach. And if you study the history as to how da'wah is actually being done, this sort of things was also practiced by the Prophet ﷺ. Because the Prophet ﷺ, when he received Christians from Abyssinia, right, he invites them to stay in the masjid, and so he has some dialogues with them. Right? And so this is also this kind of da'wah is also supported by the hadiths of Rasulullah SAW, and it is an authentic hadith. But some people, again, they will bring up to the point whereby, look, the Quran is actually very straightforward, right? And when the Prophet talked to the Christians, he don't go into all sorts of details and so forth, right? That could be correct, and that could also not be correct. That is opinion, right? That is opinion. But we also have precedents from the Quran, whereby the Quran says, come to common terms, right? And so it is also allowed. And those who actually gives da'wah from this route is also supported by the Quranic evidence. And so there's not really one way whereby you should only do things this way, and then you should not do things the other way, right? And so my approach is to actually apply the very first category, because it's a very strong category, but it doesn't always work. And so you have a different area, because you have to speak to people as the Imam Ahmad advised, and I believe it was Imam Ahmad, correct me if I'm wrong, that you should speak to people according to their knowledge, according to their level. And this is not looking down on people, and this is definitely should not be used as to raise yourself up, and say that I can only speak to you from this level because that is the amount of knowledge that you have. And my knowledge is much bigger than yours, right? And so I just want you to know that. So this is absolutely wrong. This is actually boasting. This is being arrogant, right? Someday you will just, with a click of a finger, you might forget whatever you have learned. Right? So there's no hikmah in your knowledge. Your knowledge will not be useful, right? And so it will be a waste of your time. And so I study comparative religion. I study the Jewish faith, Judaism. I study Christianity, not to debate, and not so that I can point contradictions in the Bible, because there are tons. But what's the point, right? So the point is to actually understand where the Jews and Christians are actually coming from, as well as Ismailis, where are they coming from? The Shias, where are they coming from? Right? And you disagree with their theology, or you disagree with the Christian doctrine, right? Or you disagree with the Jews because they do not accept Rasulullah as the Rasul, as the messenger. And you disagree with them with basis because you have actually studied their religion. Right? And so you are able to empathize with them, you are able to be patient with them, and you're able to put yourself in their shoes, and so that you can tweak your conversation with them, and so that you can actually make your da'wah much more fruitful. But at the end of the day, all we can do is to try. Right? As Muslims, all we can do is to try. It is not upon us to force people into our beliefs, into our faith. And it is not upon us to cause harm and to afflict pain and agony to people who disagree with us. And so this is something that we should be very careful of. Right? The most easiest thing that we can do is to hurt someone by our words. And our tongues are actually the sharpest material on earth, metaphorically. Right? Because of what it can actually do, and because of what we can actually cause. With that having said, it is very difficult to control ourselves, to hold our horses, especially when we have a lot of arguments to use against our interlocutor, and especially when our interlocutor is actually bringing up bogus arguments that doesn't make sense, right? But it is how we engage with them. We have to engage with them with patience. We have to engage with them with empathy, with apathy, and we have to know and understand that a lot of the people that we engage with, they're looking at things from an emotional perspective. They're being emotional. Because why? They're being emotional because their very faith, right, is being questioned. Their very faith is being questioned, and so they will become defensive. And so we have to prevent that from the first place. And if we are not sensitive to how people understand or how people feel, then we basically have lost the plot before we even began. But how do we understand our interlocutor's point of view if we have zero idea as to what they believe? And so, which is why the study of comparative religion is very important. The study of comparative religion is actually a Muslim invention, so to speak, right? Imam Ghazali has it, Ar-Razi has it, done all this. Right? Scholars from the subcontinent had done it, and people, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they also engage in da'wah, which is why Islam actually spreads all the way to China, right? And people convert to Islam. And so this field is actually not new, and this field is actually a Muslim invention, right? Even though it has roots in the ancient philosopher, it has roots because the ancient philosopher actually engaged in street dialogues, in try to win people over to their philosophy, right? In a sense, they are the first missionary. But when it comes to comparative religion, this is actually a Muslim invention, right? Invention, for the lack of a better word. And so we have to come to common terms with people, and the only way is for us to understand and to read their books, so that when we engage with them with knowledge, and we are able to anticipate their argument, and we are able to bring a counter argument that is palatable to them. And all this takes time and effort, but we should not neglect actually Quran and the Hadiths, the Sunnah. We should not neglect this, right? Because this is actually more important, right? And so we should also study. For example, if you are a Muslim, you should also study your own history. And so I've not done this often, but I would like to recommend a few Islamic history books. So we will begin with the Seerah of Rasulullah ﷺ. And the Seerah, I read the Sealed Nectar. Right? I have one by Martin Links, but I don't recommend that. Here, by Martin Links. Right. It was given to me by a friend of mine many years ago. I actually borrowed it, but I forgot to return it. I don't know where he is now. So I still have it with me. May Allah bless him, inshallah. And so where do I even begin? Because this is not arranged, so I'll just be random here. Forgive me. Okay, so another Sealed Nectar. A better translation, I would say. The English is much better, which is why I have 2 copies, because this English is much better. This is by Darul Huda, by the way. The earlier ones I showed you is by Darul Salam. We have the Travels of Ibn Battuta. Right. Again, a great Islamic polymath. History of the Arabs is important. This is T. McIntosh Smith, published by Yale University Press. And this actually is a fantastic book. I've read it many years ago. Also, if you want to understand the social history, okay, of Islam, the Muqaddimah, right? This is by Ibn Khaldun. This is published by Princeton University Press. Right, this is I've not read all. I've read half of it, right, but it gives you a lot of the social history of the early Muslims, which is important. There's a book by Professor Jonathan Brown that is Slavery and Islam, because the Orientalists as well as modern Christians apologists, they will always want to attack Islam, saying that the Prophet Muhammad had many slaves and so on and so forth. And so this book is actually to make you understand, right? And so One World Academic, this is Slavery and Islam by Jonathan A.C. Brown. There's an interview of him also. Tons of interviews. There's also another book about Sharia written by a Western perspective. This is published by Oxford University Press. Right. Supplement this book with obviously your own Islamic book written by Islamic scholars, right? But I'm interested to know what the Westerners are actually thinking when they actually talk about Islamic Sharia, right? And the thing is, a lot of these Christian apologists or anybody who actually attacks Islam, when you actually read sources from their own academics, from their own scholars, right, Western scholars of Islam, right, you find that a lot of the times Western scholars of Islam actually debunks the claims that these Christian apologists or missionaries, evangelists actually brought to the table. And they brought to the table all these fabrications, all these lies, and then they built their arguments based on false premises, based on lies and deceit. And so, which is why it is important to use their own literature, their own scholars, to refute their arguments, right? Because they have nothing else to say. Because if you use Islamic scholar, they can always say that, look, you're using your own Muslim scholars. These people are not Muslims, right? I'll show you more books. These people are actually Western scholars, non-Muslim Western scholars. They actually studied Islam and produces this kind of books. They actually say, hold on a second, whatever the Orientalists of the 19th century, 20th century, and whatever the Christian apologists have done, all they have done is actually to spread lies and deceits, because the Sharia of Islam is actually not what those people actually say it is, right? And so when you use books that are written and published by Oxford University Press, you're not using books published by Darussalam or by Islamic Text Society. Right? You're using books written and published by Oxford University Press and scholars. Most of the time, these people will still go on and spread their lies. But at least you have done your due diligence and say that, hold on a second. Even your scholars, non-Muslim scholars, say whatever that you say is actually a lie. Right? So this is something important. Another book is The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. Now this is a very modern as in the last 200 years or 100 years even. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine. This is very related and relevant to the political world that is in the Middle East at the present moment, and has been for the past 100 years also. But it is very important for people to know that what has happened. And what happened doesn't only begin a year ago. It is actually, the build-up is actually for 70 over years. Because something don't just happen overnight. There's always a push-pull factor that causes something to happen. And if we just ignore what caused it to happen, if we ignore that part, right, then basically we have not actually addressed the main problem, right? So it's the same as when you are reviewing your SOPs, for example, if you're trying to put into a work context. If your SOPs doesn't actually address the main issue, right, then your entire standard operating procedure is actually useless, right? And so the world is still waiting for the conflicts to be resolved. Another brief summary is Justin Morosi, Islamic Empires, 15 cities that define a civilization. Right. The very first chapter, I found that there's bias in his writings. This is just my findings. But the subsequent chapters is okay. Right. But you can still see the author's bias, or the authors leaning towards the non-Islamic camps. But nevertheless, it doesn't hurt to actually read the opinions of people that not necessarily agree with you 100%, or not necessarily represents the Islam that you know 100%, right? And so it's okay to agree and disagree. And so we should learn to continue reading literatures that actually disagree with us, right? Because then you have a wider scope and you are able to understand and determine why you disagree or why people disagree with you. And if you are proven to be wrong, then you have to change your mind, right? Because it is all about the evidence, and evidence actually have more precedence compared to your own personal inclination. Because if it's not based on evidence, and if it is based on evidence that have been refuted, then obviously you have to change your mind, because you have no basis to continue believing what you believe. If not, you're just being deceitful to yourself. Apart from that, I'm also interested in atheism. Why there is something rather than nothing. This is A Universe from Nothing by Professor Lawrence Krauss. Right. I actually used to watch a lot of his interviews in the past. He has a brilliant mind, but again, his argument actually proved that there needs to be a God. Yeah, I've not made a lot of videos on atheism because I'm trying to restrict my channel to just comparative religion. But in the future, inshallah, once I've read enough literatures on atheism, then I could probably be well equipped to speak about this. But there'll be many years to go. I also read Sapiens on a plane from Australia home. Sapiens, A Brief History of Humankind. Again, tons of rubbish, I would say. But again, I still read it. I did not finish it, by no means. But again, I still actually took the time to read it. And so there's tons of other literatures. One of the, I would say, books that I would highly recommend is 1001 Inventions, The Enduring Legacy of Muslim Civilization. This is the 3rd edition. And this is published by National Geographic. Right. Coffee was actually the inventions of Muslims, the kinds of coffee that we have today. Right. And so you have a lot of these pictures, images. Right. Some of these people have disagreed with and said it is not a Muslim invention. But nevertheless, if you want to know about the Khawarij, the Kharijites in early Islamic historical tradition, this is published by Edinburgh University Press, right? And so if you would like me to actually make videos about Islamic history, Islamic civilizations, then inshallah I might actually do it in the future. Actually, this whole channel, before I actually started recording videos on YouTube, I was actually uploading videos to IGTV, talking 90% about Islamic history, because that was my area of interest many years ago. But ever since then, I've shifted more to comparative religion, to address the Christian doctrine of the Trinity, to address the Gospels, the epistles of Paul, introduction to the New Testament, the Torah, and so on and so forth. But I don't mind making videos about Islamic history, and if I can actually pull some of the videos that I uploaded to IGTV before and maybe compile it, because I made about 50 videos on Islamic history on IGTV. Yeah, but I have to find the footage though. And so there are tons of other books. It makes no sense for me to actually go through all of them with you. And so yeah, basically I actually began this video wanting to show you some of the important Christian literatures. So before I end, might as well I just fulfill whatever I said. Okay, so the important Christian literature, first things first, is you need a great study Bible. Right? Obviously, if you don't, if you know how to read Greek, then you need to get yourself a critical edition of the Greek New Testament. Right? I can't say I know every single Greek word in here. Right? In fact, I only know a few, which is why you have lexicons. Right? Which is what I would actually recommend you get next, which is lexicons. I have here VDAC. Right? But if you want a shortcut, then you can get yourself an interlinear. Right? The New Greek English Interlinear New Testament. Right? So at the sides it has the NRSV and you also have the literal translation. You can't trust this 100%, right? Because there have been some mistranslations, which I've actually made a short video on that one. By the way, I also have another Greek interlinear. This is a different translation. This is a translation of the Christian Standard Bible, CSB. I hope it is the Christian Standard Bible. Yeah, this is correct. So you have the Greek of the Nestle Aland, and you also have the CSB translation. And I've also made a video about this, about some of the errors in the translation. You can check that out. A great study Bible, again, I will recommend the same thing that I recommended to you before. My go-to study Bible is still the Catholic Study Bible. Even though I have the SBL Study Bible, but this is, again, the Catholic Study Bible is my recommendation. And even though it has the word Catholic there, right, but basically it has nothing to do with Catholicism, right? If all, it takes a very liberal approach, which even the Protestants can actually refer to, or even the Eastern Orthodox, right? You need to know about textual criticism, and I've recommended J. Harold Greenlee in the past, and so I do not need to show you the book. And on top of that, you also need a single Bible commentary, a single volume commentary of the entire Bible. And for that, I actually made a video about the about this book, the Jerome Biblical Commentary for the 21st century. Right. So you have articles in here, and you have commentaries on the Bible here. Now, why do I recommend this instead of the Oxford? I have the Oxford single volume commentary, because the Oxford you might find a bit too liberal, right? And so this actually has balance in it. But again, this is also quite liberal if you ask the evangelist. Just look at the videos that people make out there. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that's it. You can actually look at my library or books recommendation when it comes to Introduction to the New Testament. It hasn't changed much, even though I'll be making an update to this video by the end of the year. I already have that plans because I've actually explored some additional introduction to the New Testament ever since I made that video 2 years ago or 1 year plus ago. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a bit too long. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.